Hey, I'm Adam with SC Magazine. We're at Black Hat 2014. I'm here with Timo, senior researcher with F-Secure. Timo, how's your Black Hat been so far? What did you talk about?
It's been really awesome. This is actually my first time attending Black Hat, so I was rather nervous to give a talk. The talk was about tool that I'd released for dynamic analysis of Flash files. So I released that as open source yesterday.
So what does this tool do?
It's for dynamic analysis, which means that you can use it to monitor the operations of the Flash file when you open it. So instead of just having to look at the code, you can actually see the operations from the Flash file.
So how does this differ from the way that these types of vulnerabilities were analyzed before?
Well, before you just used a decompiler, and typically those decompilers are pretty good. So you can get the ActionScript source code of the malicious Flash file, and then you can see what it's all about. But if it's somehow encrypted or if there's some commercial protector that has been used, then it can get really tricky. So the analysis can be really slow. Now with the new tool, you can just open the Flash file in the browser and then you can see all the operations it does. So then you can check, is this really malicious or what is the vulnerability that was exploited? So it should help a lot. It makes things faster.
So when you use this in your day-to-day, can you take us through like a step-by-step of how you implement it in your day-to-day?
Okay, yeah, sure. Typically when I see a new Flash file, the first question is that, well, is this malicious or not? And it's difficult to answer that question if the Flash file is heavily protected. So there might be encryption and all sorts of obfuscations and things like that. So what I would do, I would just load that Flash file in the browser with my tool running in the background. And once I load the Flash file, I let it run for a while. Then I'll check the results from my tool, and then I can see all the ActionScript method calls that the Flash file has made. And from those calls, I can then see that what did it really do? Does it look malicious?
Now, you could use this tool to dig up new vulnerabilities, or is it really just to analyze older ones?
It's mostly for identifying the vulnerability that the Flash file is exploiting. Of course, if you don't recognize the vulnerability, then there's a high chance that it's a 0-day.
Now, what are some of the vulnerabilities in Flash that are being exploited these days? What have you been able to analyze with your recent use of the tool?
Well, what has surprised me is that there has been a couple of 0-days exploited in the wild, and all of those seem to be around the same set of features. But let's see, hopefully we don't see more bugs from that same feature set. And what has also surprised me is that the number of Java exploits in the wild have really gone down. We don't see Java exploits in our statistics that much anymore. We see more Flash, which is surprising to me.
Is that because Flash is more vulnerable than Java, or are more people using Flash these days?
That's a very good question. I wouldn't say that Flash is more vulnerable. I think the main reason is that Oracle has done a really good job in mitigating the Java exploits. I wouldn't necessarily say that Java has become more secure. It's just much more difficult for example, exploit kits to exploit the Java vulnerabilities. So it might be that that's the main reason why the attackers have moved to, for example, Flash exploits. But they could use, for example, browser exploits as well.
What are some of the most popular Flash vulnerabilities these days that attackers are exploiting?
The most popular ones, well, one that I still see quite often is the CVE 2013-0634, also known as the Ladyboy exploit. It only works with older Flash player versions, so if you're running the latest version, you have nothing to worry about. But that exploit is still pretty common. I've actually seen quite many exploit kits having a single Flash file that actually exploits 2 different vulnerabilities, depending on the version that you're running.
Why do you think it is that people are still being exploited by a vulnerability from 2013?
Well, that's a good question. That's a really good question, Adam. I think, well, the fundamental reason is that the software isn't up to date. The reason why it isn't up to date, I don't really know. For example, the Flash player, it updates itself automatically. With Java, it's really not that straightforward, so I really have to give credit to, for example, Microsoft and what they've done with the Windows update years ago. That works really well. I think that's probably the only approach that's going to really work. the updates need to be completely automatic. The user doesn't need to do anything. That's the only way it's going to work.